Comments and opinions expressed on Writers in Focus are those of the individual participants and are presented for the purpose of discussion only. No endorsements by Atlanta Fulton Public Library System or Fulton County government are intended, and none should be presumed. Hi, welcome to Writers in Focus. I'm your host, James Taylor, and today I'm delighted to have as my guest Miss Laurie Beard Daly. May I call you Laurie?
You sure can.
I would like to welcome you to the Fulton County Government Center in the Atlanta Fulton Public Library. We're here to talk about your wonderful novel. It's called Destination D, published by, what is it?
Boutique Quality Books.
Boutique Quality Books. By way of introduction, you've worked in advertising, public relations, and communications. You are a playwright, a motivational speaker, and a motivational blogger. We'll talk about that later. We're here to talk about this wonderful first novel, and Laurie, I just mentioned this before a few minutes ago. I get a lot of books. People send me books, and I say, "Oh my God, I have to read another book," and I don't. This doesn't even look good. And yours was such a delight to read.
Thank you.
I can't believe I'm excited about the fact that you're here, and we're going to talk about your book. Let's do it in 3 segments. I'd like to talk about how this book came about. I'd like to talk about the characters in the book, and then I'd like to talk a little bit about you. Okay. First of all, if I have done my research correctly, this book has been a 13-year project?
It has been a very
2008?
long time. Yes.
What start?
Well, the book actually, to tell you a little bit of background, like you asked me, it actually started off as a play. I'm a playwright,
Yep.
and so when I started writing it as a play, my best friend and I actually went to another author's book signing, and his name was Elin Harris at the time.
I know Elin Harris. I knew Elin.
Yeah, and so we were there in the audience, and she kept saying to me, you could do this. And I said, I could do what? She said, you could do what Elin is doing. And I said, I could do what Elin is doing.
Yeah, you've done it.
And she said, you really could. She said, you need to, start writing books. She said, turn the play into a book, because the name of the play was originally As Plain Can Be, Plain as Plane. I was playing off of
I like
the
Destination.
Yeah.
I like was your husband's idea, right?
Yeah, it was my husband's idea. So anyway, I told her, I said, well, I've never written a book. She said, well, you never wrote plays, so figure it out. And so that kind of launched me just getting a lot of research and understanding how to write a book, and that's really how I got started. And by me being a flight attendant, as you know, the main character is a flight attendant, I used to do a lot of writing just kind of in between on my layovers if we had lull time, and people would always ask me, why aren't you talking to the other people? Why are you always back here writing? What are you doing? Because I would do it when back at that time, we could do things on our free time. Now I don't know how it is because it's been a while. And I would always say I'm writing. And I would really just be a people watcher and observe. And I had so many stories that I had gathered on my own, just from my own different types of encounters that I had with people, that it really just developed into a book. And it did take forever, because the book, I was very fortunate in the beginning with the book, because when I first started writing it, I drew the interest of a major publisher. And so she read the first 50 pages, loved it, and said, when are you going to give me the rest of the book? And I was like, when do you want the rest of the book? And so basically, fast forward, we went through the process of getting everything done, and then when it finally got to the bottom line of everything, they decided that they wanted me to pull back on one of the characters, and I didn't want to do that. And so because of that, we parted ways, and it was very depressing for me because it was going so great, and they had even, the publisher had even gotten me my own agent at the time, and things were moving along because it was almost like a shoe-in.
You're doing everything right.
We thought it was a shoe-in, but when they told me I needed to get rid of, it was Amanda they wanted me to get rid of.
No.
Yeah. So I decided.
One of your main characters.
Yeah, one of my main characters, because they felt at the time when I wrote the book, it sounded like 2 different novels, because they weren't all 3 of the women in the book were not friends at the time.
Okay.
So anyway, put it on the shelf for many, many years, and then a friend of mine said, my husband is a screenplay writer. Maybe he can help you, with kind of getting your book more developed and stuff. And that was really what happened. I took it back out, we dusted it off, and at the time we were trying to move it towards actually being a movie, because there were other networks that were actually looking at it before it actually became a book. And that's a whole nother story
Okay.
there. But anyway, so Destination D has been on many, many destinations, from play, manuscript, to major publishing companies, to television networks looking at it, and now we're here.
Now, if I were to pitch this to a Hollywood agent, I'd say, I'm going to look at my notes for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
This is the story of three women, Dee, Amanda, and Pam, who made a promise at Spelman College years ago that intertwines their life like hay around like kudzu around a tree, around a bush. We're in the world of contemporary African American professional. The professional upper middle class. It's a world of doctors, lawyers, athletes, fancy cars, designer clothes, penthouses, Atlanta, New York, champagne, lobster. It's that world. Were you in that world?
I have been in that world, yes.
How do you get in that world? I'm kidding.
Well, the thing is, like
Well,
I was
I
saying,
accurate when I said that?
Yeah, it's accurate, but I do also like to always sum it up by saying when life interrupts your destination.
Okay.
Because that's the other thing. Because all of us have goals that we want to do, and some of us actually make them, and some of us don't.
Sure.
So it's the journey that it takes to actually end there, and what is it that you do to get to the end of that journey, and how does it turn out? And that's the other premise of it, because everyone has a life's journey. And it's just a matter of, like I said, what is your journey? How do you do
Sure.
there? And it was, the three different characters went about their journey in so many different ways. But in the end, what happens at the end.
I
Right?
forget that you do this for a living now. You're a motivational speaker and blogger, and you bring people into the here and now. I want you to take over the conversation by talking about the three characters who are on a journey. But start with, I don't want to give away too much of the plot because it was
Okay.
so much fun to read. It's a page turner,
Right.
Laurie. So talk about who these three people are.
Okay. Well, we got Dee, who is the main character.
It's my favorite.
As you know. And I like to look at Dee as someone who is, obviously she's very intelligent. She graduated from Spelman College, which was my college. Went on to get her, she became a lawyer
For
at
Columbia University. Yeah.
Yes, but Dee is like many of us who have dreams and are afraid to go for our dreams. So instead of her doing exactly what she was meant to do, which was to become a lawyer, she decides to just take a detour and become a flight attendant. And she lives her life vicariously by doing other things that maybe some of us wish we had done.
Yeah.
So she pretends to be other people. And so she's, as you know, a lawyer in one city, a doctor in another
But the
city.
way you present
Yeah.
Dee is and I say this very carefully, ladies and gentlemen, because the book is filled with adult situations and
Yes.
content. But say Dee meets a man named Chris, who's a professional football player, and Chris just falls in love with her because she's gorgeous and beautiful, but Dee doesn't want to tell this guy that she's a flight attendant. So Chris might say, like, so what do you do for a living? Well, I'm a criminal defense attorney.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Or
Right.
I'm a doctor. And that's a book in itself.
Yeah, it is. Well, the thing is,
I love that.
The only thing that's different, I think, is that, and it's interesting because when you fly with people, and I've said this
Yeah.
before, people. This is not a lot of times a flight attendant's only job. You do have flight attendants that are nurses. You do have flight attendants that are attorneys.
They tell you
So,
things
yeah.
that they would never tell anybody
Exactly.
else because they were only going to see you for a couple of hours and they'll
That's
never
true.
see you. Yeah.
You hope,
You
anyway. You hope.
Wait a second. In the book, Dee hopes that. Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. She hopes she's never going to be seen
Did
again.
that guy see me
And so
last week in Salt Lake
As
City?
you know, she gets caught, in some of her
Yeah.
her scandalous things that
Yeah.
she does. But at the end of the day, like you were saying, to kind of bring it back home as to who these characters are, it's just a woman who wishes that she had done what she set out to do, and instead of just standing strong
Right.
and doing that, she is very insecure and pretends to be people that she's not. And that's basically it. And I think when I talk with other women and even men for that matter, many people have a dream about, maybe I'm in this body, but this is really not who I want to be. But they don't go around pretending to be someone that they're not.
But you, as a writer, and this is where I think you're better than 99.9% of the writers around, published and unpublished, you make her real. You make her sympathetic. I liked her. I mean, I would like to meet Dee, even though she's
Crazy.
a sociopathological liar and she pretends to be other people. I would
Right.
want to be with her. No wonder men fall in love with
Yeah,
her.
because she's gorgeous.
Yeah,
That's the other thing.
she's smart. I only
Yeah.
see the brains in women.
Right,
No, I'm just
okay.
kidding, but I do. And it's funny. Can we talk about Pam for a minute?
Yes, definitely.
Because I haven't known many women like Dee. I don't want to get myself into trouble here, but I have met a lot of women like Pam. She's gorgeous. She's driven. She's successful. but she treats people like dirt. Talk about her.
Yeah, and many times, a lot of us have had that experience where we meet people. Let's just say we've had a really ugly supervisor or a manager, and we just wonder, are they really human? Can somebody possibly be that cruel?
Why are they doing this?
Yeah,
Right.
but a lot of times it's the same thing. I've told my children. I said a lot of times when you find people that are that mean and that ugly, they've got some pain deep down inside. And the thing is, you have to figure out a way to meet them halfway. I said because a lot of times they're just they're brash and they're abrupt and they just come out, like you said, for no reason at all. But that's their way of hiding a lot of deep hurt that they have. And that's what we know about Pam, that we find out later in the book, why she is such unscrupulous, like you said, just mean, person that is just an absolute not nice person.
What makes it even more interesting, Lori, and I'm not going to divulge too much of the plot because it's in the first couple of pages, but so here's the flight attendant who's telling lies and meeting a lot of wonderful men. The men are beautiful too. Rich, handsome, gorgeous. The whole 9 yards. You get this. The book does. I'm enthusiastic about the book.
Thank you.
Pam's say she's a semi-partner in a very prestigious Atlanta law firm. She's could be the pick of any law firm in the world. She has an old friend working for her, Amanda, who's a paralegal, and that was like, friends should not work for friends. Talk about that. Talk about Amanda.
Okay. Well, Amanda.
And that's in the beginning of the book.
Yeah,
I'm not giving anything away.
You're not giving anything away. All three of them went to school together with a goal in mind,
Right.
and so Amanda did not make the goal because Amanda is a single mother, and her life kind of went a detour, but she needed a job, and Pam knew that she had the potential actually to become a great lawyer, and so as a friend, she hired her to come on board with her firm. But at the time when she hired her, it wasn't for her to actually work under Pam. And so luck would have it, whereas the assignment of some cases that she got was actually under Pam. But Pam still had this deep resentment that Amanda did not do what she was supposed to do according to their promise. So by her being mean and cruel, she's thinking that, well, first of all, she's holding a lot of resentment against her best friend, but at the same time, she thinks that by doing this, it's going to make her a stronger person and maybe actually go and do what she said she was going to do with as far as her career path is. But she went about it, totally wrong. And as we know, Amanda finally gets up the nerve to actually, stand up to Pam and just say, you have a problem. I have a great life, and I'm not going to take this anymore. And so, and it kind of, throws Pam back, actually, because Pam no longer is in control, and she really needs her to do certain things. But, Amanda has kind of gone this way because Pam is such a tyrant. So that's kind of the thing. I think with Amanda, it's almost like it's the bond of the friendship, and I share this a lot when I am talking with people. Everybody is raised differently. The way I was raised may not be the way. What I consider protocol, you may go, well, really, is that really appropriate? What do you do? Like every time someone sends me a gift, I'm going to write you a thank you note. Where other people,
you were raised well.
They might just write an email, and I think that's something that's inappropriate. So
your father was Israel with a PhD?
Yes,
yeah,
my father
yeah.
read everything, yeah. But what I'm saying is, though, so everybody values friendship differently. And so the Pam put the friendship up to a very, very high level, and she put the promise up to a very high level where she just actually took it personally. Whereas a lot of people, they understand, well, if you break a promise, depending on what the promise is, life goes on, you move on, you forgive and forget. Not Pam. She will hold the grudge forever, and that was the problem. She just could not let it go. And as we know, a lot of it had to do with just her own internal issues that she had. She couldn't let her own past go.
Right. So, I don't want to get into that, but what a character. As I said earlier, that you constructed her. She was so realistic. I know Pam. This is a world, and I'm going to be on shaky ground right now. It's a world that didn't exist 20, 30 years ago. I'm old enough to remember when in movies, books, TV shows, you didn't see African Americans as doctors, lawyers. Cosby, Dr. Huxtable, that was a huge thing.
Right.
But this is a real world nowadays. You're one of the, to me, as a heavy reader, you're one of the first to make this mainstream fiction. Am I making that up? I don't think so. What do you think?
I've read other books where you're talking about as far as African American characters being the main characters in the book?
No. At this level.
Oh.
What does your father do for a living? He's the chief of police of Chicago.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
And a lot.
That's why I'm on thin ice.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I can't answer that to say, am I the first
No, no, no.
Right.
Is that? Let me rephrase the question. Do you see this book as part of a genre of upper middle class African American lifestyle?
I can see me writing books like that, yes. I think it's very believable because the characters, although they're fiction, they are based on real life situations.
Yeah.
So yes, to answer your question,
Yeah.
I don't know how many. If you believe, and it's interesting because, like you said, you're on shaky ground, and I understand where you're coming from. But
Thank you.
For you to say that, that means that there's definitely a lot of truth in it because you and I are totally opposite: black female, white male, and
But I read a lot.
You read a lot, yeah. So if you're saying that you can see something like this being realistic, then yes, I believe that because this is something that I have lived in terms of like upper middle class, and I've been a lot of places, just like Dee has. I'm not Dee, but because of the background that I've had and the things that I've experienced and the people that I've grown up with, it's very real. I mean, doctors, lawyers, African American, everything. So
my father was a steel worker, so that's the irony involved. You know?
Okay, yeah. So yes, I do. To answer your point, I do think that it is possible that could be a continuation of different genre.
It's a reality. It's a reality. Mm-hmm. That's my thin ice. I've got thick ice under me now because you're here. We've talked a little bit about the characters, the plot. Let's talk about the plot in terms of the title, Destination D.
Okay.
I've done a little research. A big part of your life is trying to help people in their destination towards who and what they want to be. Mm-hmm. These characters are instantiations, exemplars of that journey.
Right.
How did you become so concerned about this?
Well, I think
you're really fun. This is good. This is good.
I think just from a personal standpoint, it goes back and again into the characters. When you look at somebody, you automatically sum them up where you think you sum them up in like 3 seconds. And in reality, you really don't know my journey. You don't know my story. I may look a certain way, but you really don't know some of the things that I've gone through. And it's the same thing when I talk to people, like you were saying. It's all about the journey. I tell people all the time, no matter where you are, it is never too late to move forward.
Right.
It doesn't matter. I mean, we've seen people that are quadriplegics. They have less than we do physically, but they may have more determination than a lot of people that have all of their faculties. So these are the types of things. When I share my story and the destination, it is because I want people to go beyond just the outside and to really be able to dig in and see who you are. Do you know who you are, whose you are, and what is it that you want to be? What is it you really want to be? And so even for me, I'm living my dream. This is to get the book out, to be able to talk to people. This is something I've been wanting to do ever since I can remember. Wow. And it has taken me so long to get there because I have had so many jobs and I've done so many things. Whereas at one point, I didn't think the book was going to get out until finally my husband was like, either you do something now or I don't want to hear anything else about it. I just take it off the shelf, get over yourself, quit crying about what didn't happen, and then just make it happen. And so once I decided to get over myself, and then that's when, things happen. And that's the thing I think that stops a lot of people is that we can be our own worst enemies. We stop ourselves. Yes, circumstances do happen, bad things do happen. But if you are someone that truly knows or believes what you want, it is very possible for it to happen. And I'm living proof of that because, like I said, I'm just like everybody else. I have my own pain. I've had my own sorrow. I have my own misery. I've had my own hard times. But through it all, I've pushed through and I've done exactly what I wanted to do.
One obstacle you had was Turner Broadcasting. And
Yes.
this leads me into a discussion that we had just prior to the interview. One of the catch-22s about publishing is you need an agent. To get an agent, you have to have a book. But to have a book, you need an agent. It's like a conundrum. It's a vicious circle. You had a manuscript of this book, and you were well connected. Somebody from Turner Broadcasting said, these were in the days when Turner was bigger than it is now. This is fantastic, Laurie. This is fantastic. But because you didn't have a book, they didn't necessarily trust you. Tell that story.
Well, basically,
it's a great obstacle story that you got over.
It was really interesting because the book actually, through some contacts, they had me come in and pitch it. They had read the manuscript, loved it. They said, "Come in, we're looking for some new writers for a television show." Obviously, I'd never written television before. I didn't even know how to write a pitch for a show. But again, I went through my manuals and the internet and my husband and I actually pitched it. They loved it. They sent it all the way to Hollywood. And so the people that were over the new shows looked at it and they were like, well, this is great, but where is the book? Who is she? She has no one representing her. We just can't do this. And so I had another friend that knew someone that actually ended up getting me a Hollywood agent. So I had an agent at the time. And he was even saying, he said, I have never heard of anybody getting something to a television studio like this, and there's not a book. He said, you need to get the book written and then come back. He said, because there's not a whole lot that we can really do until we understand, this is what they said, how well it's going to sell, who's going to read it, because Hollywood, my understanding was then, it has to be the audience, it has to be the incentive, and then that's when it turns in. Because I was going backwards. The book wasn't out, but they were sending it in as a television script. So that was kind of the irony. And so since that time, all of my contacts at Turner are no longer at Turner. They either got laid off or they're doing something else. So I'm basically, kind of back to where I started. But
you just endured the Great Recession,
So I'm very faithful, though. And even with you, it's been a while since we talked when I first gave you the book. And I'm just excited to be here. So I just believe that patience, faith, endurance, and just persistence will get you where you want. So.
And you're forgetting, to me, the most important thing, the talent.
Book,
Talent. You have the talent.
Good book, yeah.
Let's talk some more about that. I told you that I had taught a little workshop in getting published, and I maintain that sometimes writing your book is the easiest thing. The hardest thing is marketing and getting people to go out and buy the book. Ladies and gentlemen, go out and buy this book. It's written really well, and the story is wonderful. How did you proceed with the marketing? How did you choose a publisher?
As you know, I thought I had a major publisher at the time, put the book on the shelf.
And you should have one.
And so what I ended up doing was just going back and talking to people pretty much, and a lot of people were saying, oh, you need to self-publish. And when I started reading about what all the work was involved with self-publishing, I kind of put that to the side. And I just happened to be at an event, and someone came up to me and they said, Lori, are you still trying to find a publisher? And I said, yes. And they said, I know someone that you might like. She's small, she's up and coming, but my understanding is that she really will work with her authors. And I met Terry Leidick, who's my publisher of Boutique of Quality Books. And I loved Terry. I absolutely loved her. And she took the book, and within 6 months, it was out. And that was what I thought. I said, all I need is for someone to get it out. I can do everything else. And that's what I told her. Well, little did I know that everything else was going to be so much involved. And so even though Terry is the one that's responsible for trying to help me get it, through Amazon, through Barnes & Nobles on the shelves, I'm
it's
still
an ebook
person.
Also. Yeah,
it's an ebook also. I'm the one that really has to be the face and has to be out there and helping push it. And that's the hardest thing. And my background is in advertising and marketing. And a lot of things have changed. I mean, everything now, you have to be very social, and I'm on every social media platform there is, but I don't continuously make myself active because it's so overwhelming sometimes, So to answer your question, I know everything that has to go in place to market, but the thing is I'm just one person. And so I need to be able to pretend that I'm my own client and just work my plan, because I have an entire marketing plan, and it's just very difficult to get the attention. You have people listen to you and constantly tell other people. When you read the book, write about it. Go on Amazon.com, go on Barnes & Nobles, tweet about it, put it on Facebook, because everybody, they love it when they read it, but then after it's done, they get through meeting, they don't go back online and talk about it. So it takes a village.
And people have to read this book. Do you mind if I talk about that incident in your life in 2002 when Mike Douglas of CBS 60 Minutes interviewed your family? Mike Wallace interviewed your family, and I'm just doing this from memory right now, but it was going home to the South. Your parents lived and your father taught in Tennessee, couldn't stand the racism, and moved to Milwaukee, where you were born and raised. And then they sent you to Spelman.
Right.
And you said, this is a pretty nice place, Atlanta, and then your parents moved to Atlanta.
Exactly.
Do I have that right?
You have the story exactly right, yes.
But I remember seeing that episode. Were you in that episode?
I was. My husband and I and my parents were in the episode. And actually,
it's 11 years ago.
Yeah, my children were in it too, but they were on the cutting floor after they finished it. But it was an interesting time because it was My parents actually were interviewed in Milwaukee.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, my parents were from Milwaukee, but the Milwaukee paper, I think it was the Sentinel, came to Atlanta to interview them. 60 Minutes got a hold of that paper somehow and called my parents. And they wanted to talk about the series that they were doing about blacks moving, because my parents were from the South. And then they moved to the North, and then they went back south again. So that was what the story was about. And so they were like, well, yeah, we came down here because my daughter is down here now. And they were like, oh, you have a daughter? Do you think she would mind being interviewed by us? And so they called me, and they, gave us the pitch and what they were trying. I was like, 60 Minutes? Sure, I'm in, And then my husband was the same way. He's from New York, and he moved south. And his parents moved south also. So it was just the perfect timing, actually. And it was amazing to see Mike Wallace actually come to my parents' home and sit at the kitchen table, and then we talked and interviewed. But they talked about a lot. They had a lot of families in Atlanta. So,
What does your husband think about this book? Because it's very adult. No, I'm kidding.
My husband actually,
some great scenes.
He's my biggest
Folks,
supporter.
if you know what I mean, some great scenes.
He's
in
my
this book.
biggest supporter, and
Yeah.
I've seen him when I was first writing the book, and he would read it, and he would turn it up. He's like, how, is it? In other words, so how much of this is true and how much of this is fantasy? But he loves it. He loves
Fantastic.
it. Yeah.
Listen, I loved it.
Thank you.
Laurie Beard Daly. She's going to be a famous author. She already is a famous author. Go out and buy this book. Go to your local library and pick it up. It's called Destination D by Laurie Beard Daly. A wonderful, page-turning, thrilling, exciting, entertaining novel. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having
Go
me.
ahead.
It's a pleasure.
That was great. Comments and opinions expressed on Writers in Focus are those of the individual participants and are presented for the purpose of discussion only. No endorsements by Atlanta Fulton Public Library System or Fulton County government are intended, and none should be presumed.